You're listening to Big World Network.
Skyfire, Season 2, Episode 2, written and read by Arthur W. Johnson. Seek her love, my lonely lad, be her love till the end of day. I shall come no more to thee, nor haunt thy dreams in any way. The atmosphere was strained. Neither Seamus nor the girl spoke or moved from where they were when they first ducked into the shelter of the willow, waiting for the downpour to end. He admired the way her long tresses were braided with strips of doeskin and laid over her shoulders, rising and falling with each breath. Her shoulders were clad in doeskin as well, and the front of her dress was decorated with colorful beadwork, artistically done in the shape of leaves of the trees and flowers of the fields. Strands of skin were tied in small knots along each seam of her shoulders and sleeves, leaving little tassels as a fringe. Her moccasins were made of the same material, except that the beadwork on the toe of each slipper was sewn with the yellow and white to look like a moon. The softness of her eyes captivated him each time she raised her head to glance at him. He dared not look directly at her for fear that she might run away. Finally the reins slackened and she disappeared when he glanced away for a brief moment. "Wait!" he called as he ducked out the way he thought she had gone, but she was nowhere to be seen. He retrieved his bag and began searching the forest for that single pair of doe eyes. He ignored the fact that there might be hostile Indians in the area, suppressing the thought that it may be to them that she belonged. He had heard gory tales about the people of this wilderness, but cared only for the owner of that alluring pair of mysterious brown eyes. The day wore on as he walked in ever-widening circles around the willow. He stopped with a jerk at the sight of a single feminine footprint in the mud in the middle of the trail. He looked down the path cautiously, turned, and followed the direction of the toe pointed. When he looked to his left, he saw the Dolomite cliffs for the first time. They were so pretty that he momentarily distracted him from his search. He changed course to get a closer look at the rock face. It wasn't a solid wall, but broken now and again by small caves and crevices. As he strolled along, occasionally ducking limbs and dodging branches, he admired the contours and wondered how these formations had come to be in the middle of the forest. He was thus engrossed in thought when he came upon a gap in the rock big enough to hold Mayfield Manor. A creek ran along the right wall and out the gap, blocking his path. Seamus jumped the creek to the other side and, staying near the rock, began moving through the gap, keeping the rock wall on his right. The ground sloped gently upward, and there was a thin grove of older trees, providing a natural canopy over the area, but allowing sunlight to filter through. Within the grove was something else he didn't recognize. It looked like some kind of dwellings. As he moved closer, he began to see similar objects. People were moving around from one of the dwellings to another. He could hear their voices but couldn't make out what they were saying. He was sure he had come upon a village of some sort. He had to make a decision. If he entered the village, he might be killed as an intruder. If he remained where he was, he might be discovered and killed as an intruder. If he turned back, he might be found by other members of the village who were returning and be killed as an intruder? Seamus, lad, get a hold of your imagination. Intruder, indeed. This may be the village where the maiden came from. To see those magical eyes again was worth any risk, and of course the pride of folly. He decided that boldness would perhaps be his best line of defense, so it was with that he rose and strode into the Potawatomi village. He stopped in the middle of the square as though in a trance, for there she sat, among a group of women shelling corn. Her nimble movements stopped when a murmur went around the circle, and she looked up and stared at him, mesmerized. A bond had formed between his eyes and hers. In that brief moment they became one, aloft, out of the reach of ordinary mortal touch. The trance was broken by the phrase, "Que faire vos, mon cuy?" close by his shoulder. He whirled to face an older man with graying hair and the beginning of wrinkles on his face. "Ja venir jams pod?" Seamus stammered in half-remembered French. He rephrased it in English. "I come in peace." "You speak English?" the man asked. "More readily than French, if you don't mind," Seamus replied. "I speak both," the man answered proudly. "What do you want here?" Seamus found himself in a quandary. How could he say outright that he was looking for the lass with the big brown eyes? But what other reason had he for being there? He had never felt so muddle-headed before. Finally he said, "I am but a traveler who has lost his way." "You may stay and rest. Come," the man said as he led the way back to his lodge. Before leaving the square he spoke in his own tongue to the women. At the lodge, the older man sat on a raised platform outside the door and offered space for his guest to do the same. Seamus dutifully sat and crossed his legs in front of himself. He felt the strain of not knowing what to say to this man, whom he thought would be hostile but proved to be able to speak 3 languages. The girl with the dark eyes approached timidly with a rush basket and placed it between the 2 men. Up close, she was smaller than she had appeared at a distance under the willow. She stepped through the door and came back out with a wooden bowl of water and a gourd ladle, which she sat next to the basket. She dipped the ladle into the water and offered it to Seamus with both hands. For a moment their fingers touched and a tingle ran along his spine. He presumed that she felt the same by the gentle smile that spread quickly upward into her eyes. The older man spoke, and the girl's eyes darted to him and then back to Seamus before she pivoted and returned to her duties at the shelling basket. "My daughter's eyes have fastened upon you," he said. Seamus realized that he had not taken his eyes off her, and he still held the full ladle as he had received it. He took a long draught and settled the gourd back into the bowl. "And your eyes are upon her, I see," the chief added. Seamus blushed and looked sideways at the neatly combed black and gray hair with 3 eagle feathers attached to the locks with thongs. "You say so little, white man." "I don't know what to say or how much I may say without offending. I don't know your customs." "But you speak honestly." The man paused thoughtfully before he continued. "Hear now what I say. I am Senego, Gray Squirrel in your language. I am chief of this tribe. Bright Moon is my oldest daughter," he said, indicating the girl who had just walked away. "My Kiwi, that is my woman, went to join the grandfathers long ago, and Bright Moon has taken care of me since." He paused and offered Seamus pone from the basket. Seamus was delighted from the first bite, for the little corn cakes had been flavored with bits of black walnut and maple syrup. Senego watched him with interest and then continued. "Several young men of the village want Bright Moon to be their Kiwi. Soon she will have to choose, and the rest will have to accept her choice, unless—" He looked squarely at Seamus, then, "her choice is from outside the village." He paused for effect. "If her choice is from outside, he must prove himself, his strength, his value, his love of her and for her people. He must do this because she is the daughter of the chief, and one day he will be chief himself." Seamus felt a shiver of destiny, but kept it hidden, for Senego was watching him closely. Senego continued, "As chief, he will have many enemies outside the tribe as well as within. He will have to be strong enough to withstand many attacks so that his son may one day be chief. He must know these things before he takes Bright Moon to be his Kiwi." Seamus understood that the man had deep feelings for his tribe and his daughter and would protect them at the cost of his own life. He also understood that Senego would go to any length to see his daughter happy, as long as it was within the moral laws and beliefs of his people. Senego swallowed a morsel of pone and looked at Seamus for a long moment before going on. "But if her man is not of our people at all, if he is white, he may never become chief, for the people of the tribe will not want this." Seamus felt the fragile crystals of his hope plunge and shatter. He had been so suddenly taken by the maiden with the brown eyes that he had given no thought to such things. "What are you called?" Senego asked abruptly. "What?" Seamus asked, for he had been going over the implications of Senego's monologue. "Oh, I am Seamus O'Flaherty." He thought for a moment how he would phrase the next question, then asked, "Tell me, Senego, are there no alternatives? I mean, suppose a white man did marry Bright Moon and did not want to become chief. What then?" "If the council approved the marriage, my second daughter's man would be the next in line," was his reply. One tiny little crystal remained hanging desperately, yet delicately within Seamus's reach, if he had the courage to grasp it. One tiny crystal lighted the entire canyon where they sat eating pone on a warm summer day. Feeling dejected and frustrated, Seamus sat down on a boulder by the river to pity himself. He wondered if he would ever again belong anywhere among any people. Many weeks had passed since his arrival at the summer fishing camp on the Eau Plaine River, weeks of learning the Potawatomi customs, methods of hunting and fishing in general, and the lifestyle. He had run a grueling course for the love of Bright Moon and was still not accepted. What more could he do? The summer fishing encampment would close up and move with all its possessions and people in a few weeks. Most of the tribe would rejoin the larger village on the DuPage River, where the winter hunting would be better. Seamus would either leave or move with them, depending on Senego, the council, and Bright Moon, but mostly on the council. Seamus had picked up a branch as he thought and watched the current flow steadily and surely by. He trailed the end of the branch in the current. He felt the water tugging at the stick and saw the ripples start there and dance merrily off down the stream, laughing as it went. The river met the obstruction head-on and, if it could not move it, happily shrugged, divided, and went on its way without stopping. He realized that he must do the same. He strolled along the bank, trying to decide how best to face his obstruction. How could he move these people who stood in the way of his love for Bright Moon? If he couldn't move them, would he be able to shrug and walk away laughing like the stream? He casually tossed the stick into the river and watched it float away with the current. The sun was setting in the cloudless west, and he knew that the council would be meeting on other important matters soon, so he turned back toward the village. The council fire had been lit by the time he arrived, and the decision-makers were gathering about, with many other interested parties standing outside the circle to listen or occasionally whisper comments to those within the circle. This reminded Seamus of one of Father O'Connor's history lessons about the Roman Forum. He approached Senego and waited until the noise of the gathering had subsided. "May I speak to the council?" he politely asked the chief. Senego raised his arms to silence the protests of the few of the members who knew of Seamus's desire and wished to hear no more on the subject. In his own tongue, Senego said, "I will hear what this man has to say." He looked back at Seamus with a look of sympathy and urging. Seamus stepped within the circle and began to walk slowly around the fire. When he began his second revolution, he said, "The water in the river is pure. It flows forever." He looked from face to face as he strode around the fire. During the translation, he bent and picked up a stick that had not made it into the fire. "I threw a stick into the water, but the river did not return the stick to me. The water accepted the stick, and the stick became one with the water." The murmur went around the circle as the translation ended. The faces reflected the fact that they were accustomed to parables, and they awaited the finale with patience. "The stick floated with the water all the way to the sea. You are the river, and I have been cast among you. Will you throw me upon the bank, or let me float along with you?" The shaman spoke. "I have heard through the spirits that you left your brother when he most needed you. How can we trust you?" Seamus answered in defense, "I have never had a brother. I'm afraid your spirits have spoken falsely of me. If Bright Moon joins with you, she will one day leave, and she will never smile upon us again," the shaman added. Without answering, Seamus made one more circuit of the council fire and stopped in front of Senego. "I will await your decision by the river," he said. A coolness swept across the river as Seamus squatted by the bank, the chill of autumn approaching. The sweet musty odor of the forest and fall danced gently on the breeze. He was aware of the soft tread of someone's presence, but remained motionless, fearing a final and lasting rejection. The tender touch on his shoulder was not among the greetings he had been expecting at that moment. He looked up into the face that had lured him into his present situation, the eyes that had captivated his soul in that instant under the willow and again over the shelling basket. "They are still talking," Bright Moon said in a voice equally as gentle as her eyes. She spoke English as well as Senego, who had taught her what an old trapper had taught him years before. She sat beside him and took his hand, saying, "I have come under your magic, but I must obey my father. He wishes that I be happy, but that I do as the council says, for these are his people and mine. We must live among them all our lives." "But you don't," Seamus quietly interrupted. "You can go away with me if they object to our union. Say you will, my love," he pleaded. Bright Moon stared into the night sky at her namesake for a while, then said in a carefully controlled voice, "I must be honorable to all of my fathers, the one living and those who are not. They watch. They see us here now sitting by the water. They hear you speak of running away, and they hear me answer that I cannot, for the shame I would bring them." Seamus's mind raced. He saw Father O'Connor's stern yet gentle face and thought of all the teachings of honor the old priest had given him. Honor or love, how to choose? He saw the face of Patricia under the willow at Lochrie, and again recently, urging him to love Bright Moon. Love or honor? Why must there be a choice? He saw his mother's face, serene and silent in her final sleep. He saw his father's face, but that one, living and unlike the others, seemed to be telling him to follow his heart. After all, had he not condoned what Seamus had done for love once before, or had he merely accepted the facts as they were, something already done and irreparable? "We were born to each other," he said. "You know that, don't you?" "I feel it too, but—" "Then how can you accept their answer if the council says no? How can fate be changed by a group of men who can only see that the color of our skin is different? Come with me, Bright Moon." She looked deeply into his eyes and said, "Fate is the one who will decide the vote."
Music by Kevin MacLeod.
You're listening to Big World Network.